We all want the lie. We want to believe in the classic hero's journey. You leave the comfort of your home, you walk through the fire, you look the devil in the eye, and you come back to a warm bed and a cold drink, exactly the same person you were before. We want to believe that trauma is just a hurdle you jump over on your way to a happy ending. But Tolkien did not write a fairy tale. He was a man who survived the trench warfare of the Battle of the Somme. He spent his youth watching his closest friends get shredded by artillery fire, drowning in mud, and suffocating in mustard gas. He knew the terrifying unspoken truth about war. The person who leaves home never actually comes back. The body might return, but the mind is left permanently fractured on the battlefield. When we look at Frodo Baggins, we are conditioned by decades of pop culture to see a standard hero who saved the world. But if you look closer, stripped of the fantasy and the magic, Frodo is one of the most accurate, heartbreaking, and clinical portraits of post-traumatic stress disorder ever committed to paper. He didn't get a triumphant happy ending. He got a life sentence. Today, we are going to break down exactly why the Shire was saved, but not for him. To understand what happens to Frodo, we first have to stop looking at the One Ring as a simple magical artifact. We have to look at it through the lens of clinical psychology. In this context, the ring is a localized, parasitic trauma engine. Think about how the ring actually functions. Every single time Frodo puts it on, he isn't just turning invisible to hide from his enemies. He is being violently dragged into the Wraith world. This is a realm of pure shadow, sensory distortion, and absolute, paralyzing terror. In clinical psychology, when a person is subjected to an overwhelming amount of stress and fear, their brain implements a defense mechanism called severe dissociation. They detach from physical reality because existing in their own body becomes unbearable. The Wraith world is the ultimate metaphor for trauma-induced dissociation. Frodo is physically present in Middle-earth, but his mind is constantly being pulled into a dark, isolating void where the normal rules of reality do not apply, and where he is constantly hunted by the manifestations of his own death. And the ring doesn't just passively sit in his pocket, it actively feeds on his nervous system. Remember that the ring literally gets heavier the closer they get to Mordor. It becomes a physical weight pulling him toward the earth, chafing his neck, exhausting his muscles. This mirrors the physiological toll of severe, chronic depression and anxiety. Frodo isn't just tired from walking. He is experiencing the neurological shutdown of a soldier who has been in active, terrifying combat for entirely too long without a single moment of psychological rest. If you find this kind of dark, clinical breakdown of the stories we love fascinating, take a second to hit subscribe. We're going to be unpacking a lot more shattered minds on this channel. As the journey progresses, the trauma begins to do what chronic trauma always does. It initiates the erasure of identity. One of the most devastating conversations in the entire trilogy happens on the slopes of Mount Doom. Frodo falls to the ground, completely exhausted, and Sam tries to comfort him by talking about the Shire. He talks about the orchards, the strawberries, the taste of cream, and Frodo looks at him with hollow eyes and says, "No taste of food, no feel of water, no sound of wind, no memory of tree or grass or flower, no image of moon or star are left to me." He is being hollowed out. This is a recognized symptom of severe PTSD and severe depression known as anhedonia, the complete inability to feel pleasure, accompanied by the fading of core memories. The trauma is actively erasing his identity. It is deleting the boy who lived in Bag End and replacing his entire personality with a single, exhausting, agonizing obsession: survival. He can no longer conceptualize a world outside of his pain. There is only the burden, the ash, and the fire. The Shire no longer exists in his mind because a mind in that state of acute survival mode cannot afford the luxury of nostalgia. This brings us to the climax at the cracks of Mount Doom. And this is where the audience, and frankly, many critics usually get it entirely wrong. People watch that final moment and think Frodo failed. They think his willpower gave out at the last second, making him weak. That is a fundamental misunderstanding of both Tolkien's intention and human psychology. You don't ask a man with shattered, broken legs why he can't run a marathon. Standing over the fire, when Frodo claims the ring and says, "The ring is mine," it is not an act of greed. It is not a moral failure. It is total ego death. The human mind has an absolute, biological limit to the amount of terror, manipulation, and pressure it can process. Frodo hit that limit. The trauma finally, completely consumed the host. Tolkien himself wrote in his letters that no human, hobbit, or elf could have thrown the ring into the fire at that specific location, where its power was at its absolute maximum. Frodo didn't fail. He was simply broken by a force of nature. If Gollum hadn't been there to intervene, Frodo wouldn't have walked out of that mountain. He would have stood there, paralyzed by the overwhelming power of his own trauma, until he starved to death, or until the Nazgul arrived to tear him apart. He didn't defeat the ring broke him. When Gollum violently bites off Frodo's finger to take the ring, it is a shocking, visceral moment. But it is just a physical, visual metaphor for what had already happened to his mind. A piece of his soul had been violently severed, an amputation had occurred. And just like a missing finger, that piece of his mind was never going to grow back. Then comes the cruelest joke of survival. The war ends, the eagles come, the crowds cheer, and you go home. In the books, the scouring of the Shire shows the hobbits returning only to find their home industrialized and ruined by Saruman, forcing them to fight one last time in their own backyards. The movies skipped this, but the psychological aftermath remains exactly the same. Look at how the four hobbits handle the return to peacetime. Sam marries Rosie Cotton. He builds a family. He becomes mayor. Merry and Pippin drink, laugh, and wear their fine armor. Pin. They integrate back into society. They process their trauma and find a way to move forward. But Frodo just stares. He is a combat veteran, sitting in a peaceful, quiet village that cannot possibly comprehend the absolute hell he has witnessed. His friends and neighbors are stressing about prize-winning pumpkins, missing spoons, and ale recipes, while he is quietly suffocating from chronic alienation. He looks at the people he saved, and he realizes he no longer speaks their language. He is a ghost, haunting his own life. And then there is the physical manifestation of his trauma. Frodo doesn't just suffer in silence, his body attacks him. Every single year, on the exact anniversary of the day he was stabbed by the Witch King at Weathertop, Frodo falls violently ill. He holds his shoulder in agonizing pain. He goes pale and bedridden. Later in the year, on the anniversary of being stung by the giant spider Shelob, the exact same thing happens. There is no magical poison left in his blood. Elrond healed the physical wounds years ago. This is a psychosomatic trauma response. His mind remembers the terror so vividly, so intensely, that it forces his nervous system to relive the pain. His body is keeping the score. He is trapped in a loop, forced to experience his own murder over and over again on an annual calendar. We set out to save the Shire, Sam, and it has been saved, but not for me. Those are the words of a man who has finally accepted his own casualty. He realizes the horrifying truth of the surviving soldier. You can save the world, but you cannot save yourself. Frodo's departure to the Grey Havens at the end of the story isn't a magical reward for a job well done. It is not a vacation. It is a hospice. It is palliative care. The pain of living in the mortal world with a shattered mind, surrounded by people who could never understand him, became too great. The damage was terminal. The only way to find peace, the only way to stop the nightmares and the phantom pain in his shoulder, was to leave the mortal world behind entirely. Passing into the West is Tolkien's beautiful, heartbreaking metaphor for finding the peace in death, or escaping a world that no longer has a place for you. Frodo Baggins is the ultimate tragic hero. He carried the poison so the rest of the world could drink clean water. He absorbed the darkness so that Sam could have a family, a garden, and a normal life. He is Tolkien's love letter to the broken, forgotten soldiers of the First World War. He is a grim, deeply beautiful reminder that true sacrifice doesn't end when the swords are put away and the medals are handed out. It continues, every single day, in the silent, invisible scars of the mind. And sometimes, the bravest thing a hero can do is admit that the war finally won.